Welcome back, everyone. As you know, the first step in the fund development planning process is to evaluate your current fundraising operation. In the last segment, I walked you through the first two tasks of your evaluation: putting together a snapshot overview of your current fundraising efforts and assessing your research needs. If you recall, I'm keeping a running list of the data, interpretations, and potential recommendations that we've already uncovered in the fund development planning process. This is something you need to do when you're evaluating your own fund development operation. Trust me, it'll make it much easier to develop and implement your fund development plan. The next task in your evaluation is to analyze each fundraising channel separately. Fundraising channels are the methods used to contact and solicit prospects. In this segment, I'll walk you through the steps for analyzing the main annual giving fundraising channels. The terms annual giving or annual fund giving are almost exclusively used to describe expendable, unrestricted giving. This is why they're so important to nonprofit organizations. The two main annual giving fundraising channels are direct mail and phone. Almost every nonprofit will use at least one or both of these channels to solicit annual funds. For the purpose of this analysis, we're going to assume that our example nonprofit only solicits annual gifts through direct mail and phone channels. I'm first going to review the evaluation criteria for each channel, and then we'll conduct a simple analysis as part of the fund development planning process. First, let's analyze the direct mail channel of our fictitious nonprofit organization's annual giving program. This is an analysis for the whole direct mail program. If you're conducting your own analysis, you'll want to do this for each one of your direct mail pieces. That way, you'll be able to see which ones are effective and which ones aren't. Let's first review the terms used to identify annual giving donor group prospects. Acquisition refers to the group of prospects who have never given before, but that you're attempting to attain as new donors. This group will likely have the lowest performance. Retention refers to the group of donors who gave in the last year and that you're attempting to keep this year, otherwise known as live bunts. This will almost always be your easiest and most profitable group to successfully solicit. Lastly, reacquisition refers to the group of prospects who have given at least one gift to your nonprofit, but not in this year or the previous year. They're also referred to as side bunts or long-lapsed donors. If you're wondering why prospects are broken down into these three groups, the reason is so that solicitation messaging and strategies can be tailored based on the needs of the group. The general concept of acquisition solicitations should be, here's my organization and this is why you should give. Retention solicitations, on the other hand, should be, don't forget to make your gift to us again. Reacquisition solicitations should be something like, you know who we are and this is why you should come back to us. There's also a process called segmenting that breaks down these groups even further based on constituent type, giving history, wealth screenings and ratings, lifestyle factors, and predictive analytics, which we covered in the previous segment. For example, the solicitation channel and messaging should be different for your board members than they would be for your service recipients or alumni, even if they're all in the retention category. But the steps that I'm showing you provide you with the foundation for conducting these same analyses for any donor group or segments. Segmenting is important not just because you can tailor messaging to the prospects in each segment, but you can also choose the channel or channels through which they will be solicited based on their segment. Segments are also useful so that you can tailor the frequency and timing of solicitations based on the needs of your group. They also help you compare apples to apples. This table represents the past fiscal year. As you can see, not all 10,000 prospects in the nonprofit's database are being solicited through annual giving channels. There are a number of reasons why this could be the case. First, there are some prospects who won't be solicited through any channel. There are two main reasons why prospects won't be solicited. The first would be because you don't have valid contact information for them. If you recall from the previous segment, there were 300 donors that this nonprofit did not have any contact information for. The second reason not to solicit prospects is because they've told you that they do not want to be contacted by your organization. Every fundraiser who's been in the field more than 5 minutes has gotten at least one call or nasty email from a prospect saying, "Never contact me again." These people need to be excluded from all solicitations. Your total prospect base minus the prospects in these two categories is referred to as your solicitable prospect base. Most nonprofit organizations will solicit their entire solicitable prospect base through at least one annual giving channel. The most common way to reach the entire base is through direct mail solicitations because it's cost-effective and non-invasive. There are a few reasons why prospects may be excluded from one or more annual giving solicitation channels. First is that most organizations will not solicit their highest level prospects and donors through typical annual giving channels. Donors at the highest level usually require a more personalized approach to solicitations. Frontline fundraisers and/or volunteers should be conducting these solicitations, and therefore those high-level prospects would be excluded from other annual giving channels. The second reason to exclude prospects from annual giving solicitations would be if the prospect says that they will not give to the annual fund. This is becoming more and more common. Some prospects don't want their gifts being used for non-specific purposes. For example, I've had prospects say that they won't give gifts that might be used to pay staff and/or pay the electricity bill. While it's important that nonprofits raise those unrestricted funds to pay staff salaries and the electricity bill, it's a waste of resources to solicit prospects who have explicitly told you that they will not give to the annual fund. It'll also annoy those prospects if you don't listen to them, and then they won't give to any purpose. Another reason to exclude prospects from one or more annual giving channel is if the prospect says that they do not want to be contacted through that specific channel. The most common example is when prospects say that they do not want to be called by a nonprofit. You have to respect their wishes, but you can still solicit them through different channels like direct mail. Another common example has to do with email solicitations. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you gave money to an organization and now you get 20 emails a day from the organization asking you for more money. That's why prospects must be given the opportunity to opt out of email solicitations, and you must respect their wishes. Otherwise, they may get so frustrated that they decide never to give to your organization again, and then you won't be able to solicit them via any channel. The last reason to exclude prospects from annual giving solicitations would be if a staff member and/or volunteer is working with them or planning to work with them on a gift to your organization, usually a larger gift. This is most common in organizations that have major gift fundraisers. If a major gift fundraiser is planning to solicit a prospect for $10,000 this year, you wouldn't want to jeopardize that by calling and asking the prospect for a $2,000 gift to the annual fund. Now that we've covered who is being solicited, let's take a look at the metrics for evaluating each annual giving channel. For direct mail solicitations, the response rate, or gift rate, is one of the best ways to evaluate the effectiveness of your direct mail program. This measures the percentage of prospects who send in gifts in response to your solicitation. It's not uncommon to have low response rates to direct mail solicitations. Direct mail is usually the least effective form of solicitation. That doesn't mean that it's not worth it, though. To determine if it's worth it, you need to look at additional factors like the donors that respond and how much you raise from them. Average gift can also be a helpful way to compare groups and segments and tailor the messaging in your direct mail pieces appropriately. Percent of upgraded donors is an interesting metric. It tells you the percentage of donors who replied to the direct mail solicitation with a gift that was larger than their last gift. Upgraded donors are essential to a nonprofit because they ensure that funds raised continue to increase from year to year. The next two columns show you the total number of donors who responded with a gift and the total amounts raised from them. As you can see, 20 new donors were acquired through the direct mail program, 175 donors were retained, and 50 donors were reacquired. The next section is the most important part of your analysis. Current year costs is self-explanatory, but learning how to calculate return on investment is an essential skill that you need to master. To calculate return on investment, subtract current year expenses from current year dollars raised to get the profit. Then divide the profit by the current year expenses. That will give you the return on investment. When you're calculating return on investment, or ROI, don't forget to include staff time in your expenses. If you have channels that require a lot of staff time to pull off, it's important to account for that if you want a true measure of return on investment. It's also important to recognize that acquisition and reacquisition groups will almost always have negative ROI, no matter what channel you're soliciting them through. That doesn't mean you should cut those programs, though. They are an investment in your future. The goal is to acquire or reacquire donors, turn them into regular donors, and then work on upgrading them so they'll eventually give you a positive ROI. That takes an initial investment of time and money. Now let's take a look at the annual giving phone program. Colleges usually conduct phone-a-thons by hiring student callers to make solicitations throughout the school year. Some nonprofits outsource their entire calling programs. Others have staff members and volunteers do their calling. No matter what, phone is an important aspect of any annual giving strategy, and it's much more effective than direct mail solicitations. As you can see, the prospects are broken down by acquisition, retention, and reacquisition. For a calling program, it's always a good idea to segment further. By segmenting your prospect base, you can create calling scripts and strategies that are most effective for each segment. The contact rate refers to the percentage of prospects that you're actually able to reach on the phone. There are two reasons there could be a low contact rate. First is that you have incorrect or missing phone numbers for prospects. The second reason is that people simply aren't answering your calls, which is becoming more and more common. The next two columns refer to the percentage of people who answered the phone and said yes to your solicitation. The gift rate refers to the people who actually paid their gift over the phone, usually by credit card. And this usually measures the effectiveness of the calling strategy or script. The pledge rate, on the other hand, refers to people who committed to give a specific amount to the nonprofit when you called, but didn't actually pay over the phone. This is still a positive outcome, but it's preferable to get a gift over a pledge. A pledge means that you need to dedicate resources to chasing down the gift. The next column shows the percentage of those pledges which were actually fulfilled. As you can see, there's a significant amount of pledges that go unfulfilled. When you call to ask a prospect for a gift or a pledge, they may say that they want to give but aren't ready to commit to an amount. They may say that they need to think about it or talk with their spouse about it. These are referred to as considering prospects. It's important to track these responses separately from gifts, pledges, and refusals. It's also important to track the percentage of considering prospects that ended up making a gift. It will help you to measure the effectiveness of your solicitation scripts and follow-up communications. For example, if you notice that only 10% of the prospects who say they're considering a gift actually make a gift, there's probably something wrong with your calling script and/or your follow-up. The last type of response is a refusal, which is self-explanatory. When the refusal rate is high, it may be an indication that there's something wrong with your calling script or your calling strategy. But there are usually a few prospects who say no and then give a gift anyway. They may be moved to a different type of solicitation. They may just say no over the phone because you bothered them during dinner time. You never know. I already explained the remaining metrics during the overview of the direct mail program, and they have the same relevance to phone as well as any other giving channel. Now that we've reviewed the terminology and relevance of each criteria, I'll give you some examples of how to analyze this information. Please note that this analysis is not exhaustive. These are just a few examples to show you how it's done. For the direct mail solicitations, we are going to assume that there's different messaging for acquisition, retention, and reacquisition mailings. As I previously mentioned, nonprofits should conduct this type of analysis for each mailing in order to determine which are successful and which aren't. For the purpose of this analysis, we'll assume that there is just one mailing with the 3 different versions. As I've explained, acquisition is an important part of any fundraising strategy. Acquiring new donors helps to ensure long-term stability of your organization and your fundraising operation. But as you can see from this table, the return on investment for this group is negative 84%. It's common for there to be a negative return on investment for the acquisition and reacquisition groups, but this is exceptionally low and just not acceptable. In order to determine the next steps, we need to take a look at the raw data. The direct mailing to the acquisition group brought in a total of $400 and only acquired 20 new donors. Meanwhile, the mailing cost over $2,300. So let's add these items to our data list. The acquisition mailing has exceptionally low ROI. It only raised $400, acquired 20 new donors, and cost over $2,300. If you recall from the previous segments, the next step is to interpret the data. So under our interpretations, we'll add that the acquisition mailing was unsuccessful. The next step in the evaluation is to brainstorm potential recommendations based on your knowledge and industry research. So let's add some suggestions to our list for how to correct this issue with acquisition through direct mail. Could decrease the costs by only mailing to the highest rated prospects in the acquisition segment. We could test new messaging on acquisition donors to see if that improves their performance. Or we could completely get rid of the acquisition mailings and look to a different channel to acquire new donors. You would follow these steps for evaluating the rest of the direct mail program, which we won't go through in this video. Next, let's look at the annual giving phone program. One of the most important factors to look at is the fulfillment rate of prospects who make pledges over the phone. It's unlikely that you'll ever achieve 100% fulfillment because things do happen that are out of your control. For example, one of the prospects who made a pledge may lose their job and be unable to fulfill their commitment. So don't be alarmed by a less than perfect fulfillment rate. As you see in this table, the retention group has a very good rate of fulfilled pledges. However, the acquisition and reacquisition groups are much lower. We'll add that to our raw data. When we interpret that data, we see that the retention group has a successful fulfillment strategy and therefore doesn't need to be changed. However, the acquisition and reacquisition groups are actually making pledges, but only about half of those pledges are being paid. If we can increase the fulfillment rates of those groups, we could nearly double the funds raised from them, thus substantially increasing the program's ROI. For potential recommendations, we could change scripting for these groups to encourage them to make gifts instead of pledges over the phone. We could also implement reminder calling to remind prospects that they made a pledge and offer them the option again to pay over the phone. For your own fund development planning, you'll want to conduct this type of analysis for other performance metrics as well. But note that annual giving channels are all intertwined, so make sure to keep an eye on the whole program. For example, if you're able to improve the effectiveness of your mailings, this means that prospects who give in response to those mail pieces probably won't give in response to a phone call. They'll say, "I already gave this year." And this will impact the ROI of your phone program. It's just something to keep in mind as you go through this process. Lastly, I want to mention the importance of multi-channel fundraising. This is becoming a common term in the fundraising world. It refers to using various communication mediums to appropriately reach and solicit different groups of prospects. So I'll offer you one more item for analysis. For data, note that we only solicit annual funds through phone and mail channels. The interpretation is that we're missing out on prospects who would respond better to email solicitations. So the potential recommendation would be to develop and implement a program to solicit annual funds through email. This wraps up this part of the fund development planning process. I hope that these examples have been helpful as you embark on evaluating your own annual giving channels. Annual giving is such an important part of any nonprofit's fundraising organization, so it deserves your attention. In my next segment, I'll walk you through how to evaluate your major giving channel. Until then, please feel free to email me with any questions about evaluating your annual giving channels. Thanks for tuning in.